In this lecture, I'm going to discuss volumes. In the Unreal Engine, a volume is a 3D area of space that is invisible to the player and serves a specific purpose depending on its type. You can access a variety of volumes from the Volumes category in the Create menu. So, for example, there is something called a blocking volume. A blocking volume will prevent actors from being able to enter that volume. So you can use them as a type of force field, or just to block off areas of your level where you don't intend for players to go. So I'm going to drag a blocking volume into my level, and then resize and position it so that it covers this area here. So now when I press play, you can see that the area I defined with the volume is not accessible. It will block the player from entering that space. So with my blocking volume selected, I'm going to go over to the Details panel and scroll down a bit and notice that there's a category called Brush Settings. So a volume is actually another type of brush. However, for the entirety of this course, I will refer to volume brushes as simply volumes in order to avoid confusion with geometry brushes. Okay, and so under Brush Settings, you have the same properties available as the geometry brushes. You can change the shape and size of the volume and so forth. Okay, so let's look at some other volumes. So a camera blocking volume is just like a blocking volume, but is meant to block only the camera. So this is useful in third-person games when you want to keep your camera confined to certain parts of your level. Perhaps the most important type of volume is the trigger volume. Trigger volumes are cool because they can be used to trigger something called an event when an actor enters or exits them. In the upcoming section on blueprints, I will show you how you can define a set of instructions for the engine to perform when certain events occur. So for example, if I had a haunted house in my level, I could place a trigger volume in the doorway in the doorway of the entrance, and I could name it Player Enters House Volume. And then using a blueprint, I would be able to define an event and name it something like Player Enters House Event that should fire off a set of instructions anytime the player enters the Player Enters House volume. And I could define those instructions to be anything I wanted, such as playing a scary sound file, or having the mesh of a bat fly around the room, or playing an all Nicolas Cage version of the Girls Just Want to Have Fun music video, etc. You know, just anything really terrifying. So the end result would be that anytime the player enters that doorway, something specific happens. To give you another example, let's say I had a racing game. I could place a trigger volume at the finish line so that when the player reaches that point, it will trigger the event that handles the end of the race. So you can see there are many uses for trigger volumes in the world of gaming, and I will be using them more in the lectures on blueprints. So going back up to the Create menu, another type of volume is the pain-causing volume. A pain-causing volume will cause damage to an actor who enters that volume. So for example, you could surround a fire with a pain-causing volume so that a player takes damage if they enter the fire. Damage is a built-in concept in the Unreal Engine, and you can use blueprints to define what happens when an actor takes damage, such as subtracting from their health based on the amount of damage done. So let's take a look at some of the properties of a pain-causing volume. The first property is called simply pain-causing, and this will determine if the volume will actually apply damage to actors that enter it. So by unchecking this, it will disable the pain-causing feature of the volume. The next property is damage per second, and this determines the rate at which the actor inside the volume is damaged. But note that it does not determine the interval at which the damage is applied. That is set by the pain interval property. So for example, with this at 1 and this at 1, this is saying that every 1 second, 1 point of damage should be applied. If the pain interval was changed to 0.5, then damage would be applied every half second. However, now only half a point of damage would be applied each time, so that overall the actor is still only receiving 1 point of damage per second. If the pain interval was changed to 2, then damage would only be applied every 2 seconds, but it would apply 2 points of damage each time. So an easy way to calculate how much damage will be applied at each interval is to multiply these two values together. So if the damage per second is 2 and the pain interval is 4, we know that 8 points of damage will be applied at each interval. Okay, so the damage type allows you to change the overall way that damage by this volume is handled by the engine. However, in almost all cases, you will just want to leave this on the default, so I'm not going to go into it any further than that. And finally, entry pain. This just specifies whether or not damage should be applied to the actor immediately upon entering the volume. With entry pain checked, the actor will receive damage immediately, and then again after every interval. With entry pain unchecked, the actor will not receive any damage until the first interval has elapsed. Alright, so another type of volume is the kill Z volume. This volume will destroy any actor that enters it. So this volume is useful for defining any places in your level that mean instant death. So for example, if you had a pit of lava in your level, you might want to surround the pit with a kill Z volume. Or if you wanted to kill a player that had fallen off a ledge into a bottomless pit, you would probably want to use a kill Z volume. So let me demonstrate that now. So if I drag a kill Z volume into the level here, and I make it really wide, and place it under the platform, this will cause the actor to be inevitably destroyed if he or she falls off the platform. So if I press play and I fall off the edge, once I reach the kill Z volume, the actor I was controlling will be destroyed. So now I won't be able to do anything anymore like move around. And then from here, you can make a blueprint that defines what should happen when the player is destroyed, like displaying a game over menu or something. Another type of volume is the physics volume. This allows you to change the physics of the space within the volume. For example, the first property here is terminal velocity. Terminal velocity is the maximum speed that something can reach when it's falling, or put another way, the maximum speed something can reach due to the forces of gravity. So when something falls, if nothing interrupts the fall, that object will continue to accelerate until it reaches the terminal velocity, and then it will no longer accelerate, it will fall at a constant rate of speed. In the real world, all objects falling towards the Earth have the same terminal velocity, but this value will be different on other planets that have different amounts of gravity. So you could use the terminal velocity property to better mimic an alien world, or you could use it to produce other effects. For example, reducing the terminal velocity of the volume to something really low so the objects fall very slowly through it for some reason. The next property is priority. This is used when two physics volumes are overlapping to determine which volume settings should be used for that overlapping space. The higher the number, the higher the priority. So if I had a physics volume with a priority of 0, overlapping a physics volume with a priority of 1, only the settings for the volume with a priority of 1 would be honored within the overlapping space. The next property is fluid friction. This is used to mimic the friction that occurs when something passes through something semi-solid. For example, trying to walk through water is a lot more difficult than walking through air because there is a lot more friction. And walking through mud is more difficult than walking through water. So the higher the fluid friction, the slower the objects will pass through it. And then finally is water volume. This specifies whether or not the space that the volume is defining is supposed to be occupied by water or a water-based liquid. So this, for example, could be used in blueprints to specify that anytime the character is within a water volume, that the character should have the ability to swim. Alright, and I just want to point out that other volumes have this character movement category as well, such as the pain causing volume and kill Z volume. But if all you needed to do is affect the physics, then you would use a physics volume. Alright, so as you may have noticed, there are several different types of volumes available, so I won't be covering them all in detail in this beginner's course, but just know that a lot of the remaining volumes are volumes used to tweak performance. For example, the light mass importance volume can be used to specify areas of the level where the lighting should be rendered more realistically in order to make that area look better, or less realistically in order to improve performance. Alright, so that will conclude the lecture on volumes.